welcome to the Integration Station and a Merry Christmas to everybody out there as well. I'm your host, Michael, a child and adolescent occupational therapist, and with me today...
Edith King, clinical lead at Parkside OTFC.
There you are. And Edith, we are here post-Christmas.
Did you have a good Christmas?
It was chaos, but it always is. I think took a few things down a notch this year, tried to keep it a little bit quieter, but it's a lot of family time.
Yeah.
So, yourself?
Yeah, 3 different Christmas events that I travelled between.
Nice.
But designated driver at the moment, so
perfect.
That meant I was able to whip everyone into gear and get them moving along.
So here we are, Boxing Day. Some people might be watching the cricket. Those who aren't, listen to this. That's it. Jinx. Perfect. Well, we have a few questions that have come through. Most of them seem to be related to sort of holiday activities and other things we can do outside of the clinic space, which I think is good. Probably come at a good time to tackle this stuff. I am certainly trying to find some activities to do with my son over the holiday period. When it's really hot, it can be tricky as well, but if you've got a pool or the beach, it does go a long way.
Yep.
We've got a question here on interoception, and for those at home, interoception always comes up as interception, or there's a red line underneath. I think you were mentioning that before. We also have one on supporting kids to generalise their learning from the clinic into the homes. But we might start with a holiday question, which is...
How do you support kids over the holidays when they don't go into OT for a period of time?
Great question, because we close our practice for a couple of weeks and we need to make sure that our young people are still finding things to do in their week. And I guess even in school holiday periods, they go for a while. Yep. And I know lots of parents by the end of school holidays are like, bring back school. Yeah.
Or even, let's take away the holidays. It might be that for whatever reason, access to OT just isn't able to be had at that particular time for whatever reason. So I think it's a great question.
Or a break. Therapy break.
Yep.
Maybe having a break from OT. How do we continue to support kids when they're not going OT? So lots of scenarios there. So what's your go-to? Is there a go-to for you about once they've finished their block of OT, or in the holiday season when there's a bit more time on their hands? What are some things you might throw to?
Yeah, I think that rather than suddenly giving the parents or the carers, 5 or 6 different things they can do over that time, which might feel a little bit, full on, if we've slowly given them different ideas every few sessions on what they can be trialling at home, and then almost giving them a bit of a wrap up about that right at the end can be really helpful.
Christmas themed?
Can be Christmas themed, absolutely.
Wrap up, yeah, like it.
Oh, I liked it. Missed that one.
That's all right.
I think that making sure we're still supporting some of those activities in the home environment or wherever they are over a holiday period, you don't have to have all of the equipment that might be in the therapy space your child is used to accessing, but that doesn't mean that you can't still do things. In saying that, some of the tools we use here are very easily accessible. First thing that comes to mind is a scooter board, $16 from Bunnings, little plug there. But there's so many different things that you can use at home just with things around the house that can continue to support their therapy, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your creativity can't be stifled here. So sometimes it's how creative you are will only make it more engaging for that young person. And you're right, like you don't need to have all the pieces of equipment at home like we do in clinic. Yeah, I mean, yes, it does help if you've got that equipment, of course. But there are so many things you can do. And I always think, I love Skittles and love knocking over bowling pins and those sort of things. And the first thing I do is just get a whole bunch of empty bottles. Yeah. Christmas season, I guarantee there's a bunch of 1.25 litre bottles of soft drink that are just lying around, going to get thrown out. Pop a bit of water in the bottom, make them a bit heavier, and they're your bowling pins.
Yeah.
Things like that are really simple. Bunch of socks to throw, or you can use cubby houses with your couch. I was doing that the other weekend when it was hot and the air conditioning. There are so many ways that you can transfer what we're looking at in clinic into that space. So I'm thinking, you might have kids going in through the tunnel system in the parkside space, or through, at Plus we've got the big rhino steps in the climbing space. You could do that with boxes. You could do that with pillows, with cubby houses, building that spatial and body awareness.
An empty quilt cover, one of my favourite ones. Yeah.
Under a table, masking tape. The amount of things I have done with masking tape to help build and promote spatial and body awareness, it is such a simple tool. And, back to Bunnings, you can get 6 loads of masking tape for like $6. Done. That's, that's one piece of equipment that is pretty easy on the money. Yeah. But the other thing is, lots of kids will be getting, hopefully there might be a few presents here and there for Christmas for those that are lucky enough. And if they do, you can absolutely use some of those things in the play, because guarantee there's going to be motivation to use those things.
And you've just made me think of 2 things as well. You said, being creative is one of the best, I guess, opportunities in this period, and actually getting the child or the adolescents to be the person that's being creative. So, challenging their ideation. What can we use instead of the Skittles in OT, or what can we use to help us get from A to B outside, from one end of the pavers to the other, I think is a really great idea to support that organising and planning. And then you were talking about some of the hot weather as well. It's such a great opportunity to start doing some of that really messy play. And one of my favourite activities that I suggest to parents is, getting some water into a big bucket or container and freezing it, but inside it maybe you've put a little bit of colouring, or maybe you've put a few other toys, or maybe they love dinosaurs, and so you popped that in there, and then it's almost like chipping away at fossils. So their water's melting, they're exploring what's inside there, they're getting messy. There's a lot of different things going on, lots of different sensory experiences, and you can do it with so many different beans and rice, and you can make your own slime, make your own putty. So
great ideas. So I think if families are home over those holiday periods, then there are lots of things we can do. And what I'd also say is that sometimes children like seeing their therapist as well, and they like seeing someone different as opposed to just the parents they see all the time, and I certainly get that. So another good opportunity to be able to engage in these activities with peers, with friends, with cousins or other family members, to provide some of that other input, and just a different face over that period as well could be really cool.
Yeah.
So that's supporting children over the holidays. The next question kind of lends itself to this a bit as well, in terms of generalising learning from what we do in the clinic to sessions in real life. So the question is, how do you support kids to generalise learning in sensory-based clinic sessions to real life? I think the last question we answered kind of gives a bit of insight into that, but I think really importantly, clinic-based sessions that we run here are done in that way because of the therapy approach that we take. So we take an air sensory integration approach, and best practice is for that to be done in a clinic. So ultimately what we're doing is taking the assessment information we've gained from a standardised sensory integration assessment, and then applying the areas of strength and areas of improvement in our sessions using the equipment that we have that is designed to support those areas, right? Now, that's clinic-based therapy. Obviously, you can still apply some of those principles outside of the space, just in other ways.
Yeah, and I would say almost encourage you to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to see those gains.
And you mentioned before, actually off air, that we see these young people for, 50 minutes a week. They spend the rest of their time at home, and we can work on lots of things in that period of time whilst we're with them. But a lot of the progress comes down to what we're able to then take on when we're at home, or when we're in the community or at school or other environments. And so supporting children to generalise learning and supporting to children to generalise those skills comes down to, I think, two things. One, how that OT has presented those activities. You mentioned the last question. If you give them 10,000 activities, they're going to go, I don't know where to start. But you give them one thing to focus on and drip feed that. That's a really good way to be able to support that parent's capacity to work on those skills. I always think when we're going, what we're working on in the clinic looks like this, what we're doing at home looks a bit different. Let's go with what's one of the biggest things you want to work on at home, and what's one of the biggest things that you want to target, like goal-wise, within the home environment. And so what you're doing is you're saying, okay, we can work on that in clinic, but then when we're going out into the home environment, it looks like this. Because I think if you can paint a picture of what it might look like, then parents are going, one, okay, I can see what it looks like, and two, I don't need all the equipment to be able to achieve that.
Yeah. So you're saying almost we can do both some of the, let's call it homework activities that we mentioned before, but equally you might be looking at the higher level tasks that those homework activities have been working towards developing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's learning, and it's learning about being able to generalise. Now, one thing I do know is that for a lot of our young people, particularly those who are higher needs with more difficulties in cognitive capacity, generalising skills can be really hard. So what they're used to doing maybe in the clinic, that's their environment, they're used to doing those things. And so being able to generalise that in the home environment can be trickier. Doesn't mean it's not possible, it just means it needs to be stepped out a bit more. And it needs to be broken down. And we did an episode about sort of dyspraxia and breaking things down and how to support young people who are more cognitively impaired. And so that certainly gives some insight into maybe how you can support that. But I think if you're able to see how the clinic, the essence of what's being worked on in the clinic can then be taken out into the home environment, then you've got a bit more of an idea of what to work on.
And I think as well, if we are going back to some of maybe the more building blocked tasks, getting that carer involved in learning how you might do that so that they actually feel like they have the tools and the skills when they do get home. Or equally, having the person that comes to OT to explain it to the parent and teach the parent, which gives them a little bit of buy-in and autonomy as well.
So, one more question.
Interoception.
So some of you may not be picking up on signals during this period of eating too much or whatnot. And so that's one sign of maybe interoceptive awareness not always supporting you. There are other things going on, and you go from one lunch to another, or you go from one lunch to a dinner and go, I can still fit food in, and your body's probably telling you not to, and you're kind of ignoring those signals. But for some people, this is what it's like all the time, right? The question we have here is, what's the most effective way to increase children's interoception awareness? And there's a lot that can be unpacked here. I was very fortunate enough to attend the ISIC conference, the International Sensory Integration Congress in Sydney a couple of months ago, and one of the lead sensory integration OTs there, a lady called Shelley Lane, Dr. Shelley Lane, talked about interoceptive awareness. She actually did a whole presentation on that. And there is still a lot that needs to be done in this field. There is still a lot of unknown. So in terms of increasing a child's awareness, it is still very early days. But how familiar are you with some of the programs and...
I know we've got one particular program, I guess, that we use here, but the interoception cards is the ones that I'm talking about. However, as you mentioned, I do work in a space with slightly younger people, and so at times those cards may need to be adapted, and so we have worked on our own almost interoception cards that we use here to support some of that awareness. And One of the ways that we do that is talk about, what are your body clues? So be a bit of a detective and really listen into what's going on for your body. You might not be able to associate it with the exact feeling or the emotion, but you might be able to pick up on my stomach's feeling a little bit funny. And then, okay, let's unpack. Is that hunger? Is that fullness? Is that I need to go to the toilet? Is it because I'm feeling anxious? Like, what's going on there? And then having those conversations based on the body clue can be a really good one. I actually had a great conversation with a psychologist who mentioned that perhaps understanding what's happening inside can be a little bit abstract and can be a little bit trickier. So why don't we focus, especially for our really young children, why don't we focus on what's happening on the outside first? What does that feel like? How does the sun feel on your skin? How do the rocks or the grass feel under your feet? To then be able to say, how does it feel inside you when you're hungry? So if we can help to understand what's happening on the outside first, it might help to start weave into what's happening on the inside too.
Yeah, it's good advice. And I think when we are working with children of any age with interoception, you raised the point about it's the link between what you're experiencing from a sensory perspective with what you're feeling, and the link between the feelings and the sensory world. And that's where that can be extremely, be quite a strong crossover there and quite a strong link. You made the point about I'm feeling hungry and so my tummy feels this when I'm feeling hungry, but your point about the feel of the grass on my feet, is it something I like, or the feeling of that texture on my hands is something I like or don't like, can certainly help build that literacy around linking emotions to sensory input.
Yeah.
When I'm working with older ones, I do have a questionnaire. So there's an interoceptive questionnaire that we use, and I think you've used it as well.
I've used that before.
And that certainly does help for older children and teenagers, and there's one for adults as well. And that questionnaire can help provide what I say is a bit of a baseline of understanding where a person's different levels and where their untapped strengths may be. And sometimes this is not necessarily new for people, but new in that it provides data on these areas, and we're able to sort of break it down so they can actually see what's happening for them. And so there are in those questionnaires there are elements such as self-regulation, just noticing things, listening to your body, being distracted, trusting, absolutely. And I always say one of the most effective ways, go back to the question, one of the most effective things is to look at body trust. Do I actually trust my body? Because for a lot of people that have interoception difficulties, they don't trust their body, which means they can't always notice or pick up on things and go, yep, I trust what's going on. And if that's your experience, like if you don't trust what your body's telling you, that's a really hard place to be in.
Yeah.
So I think some of the points that you've raised, I think are useful in that, particularly for those younger ones, starting on the outside. And this one can also come back to some of those social stories which we've mentioned in previous episodes around how is this person feeling, and this person's experience of a situation has meant that their body is doing this. For example, they're feeling quite anxious and therefore in their tummy they're feeling this, and then being able to then say that's everybody might experience hunger in a different way. It might be a different part of their body that experiences it. Everybody might feel anxiety in a different way, and there might be different parts of the body that show that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that anxiety example that you just gave, and that's definitely something I talk to my clients about. Where do you feel anxiety? And you can model it. I feel anxious in my shoulders and in my neck, but other people might feel it in their stomach, or they might feel it in their hands, and trusting then when their body gives them that signal to be able to pause and think, okay, there's something in this situation that's making me feel that particular way. I'm going to, trust what my body's telling me and then respond to it.
So I guess in answering and summing up here, it does come down a lot to one, trust, being able to trust the body, but then taking time to notice what's happening in the body. And I think we are all guilty of being extremely busy lives and things going on all the time. And I could imagine, it depends on each child's situation or each young person's situation here, but you're not always picking up on signals because there's so much stuff going on around. And so being able to tap into that and being able to have opportunities to stop and listen to your body, to pick up on those cues, can really help in being able to then know what that looks like when other things are going on around you.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing as well and learning more about is that interoception isn't just, a physical body need in the sense of I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I need to go to the toilet. It's also very much emotionally linked. So it can be I'm nervous, I'm worried.
100%.
Rather than just the physical need.
Correct. Yeah. And I think the more we understand about interoception, the more we'll be able to understand how to support individuals moving forward. And there's a lot of unknowns there, but I think some of this can be trial and error and making it work for that young person to get them to understand more about themselves, because at the end of the day, that's all we want them to do, is to be able to trust and understand themselves better.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, I might go and watch the cricket.
You can go watch the cricket. Any leftovers?
Oh, there's always leftovers. Plenty of food left over, so
Great.
I might do that. But thank you for joining me again, and I hope you
having me.
Enjoy the rest of your holiday break.
I might go jump in the pool.
Oh, great.
Great.
Well, everybody else, enjoy the rest of your holiday period, and that is our last episode for the year, but we will be back in 2025, pleased to say. We might have Edith, we might have Eleanor, we might have someone else. You might not even have me. Hopefully I'm still here. But anyway, there will be some exciting times ahead in 2025. So thank you for tuning in. And we might do a big Christmas shout out to Fletch.
Merry Christmas, Fletcher, and shout out to you.
And hope Father Christmas did bring you something, maybe an extra OT session or something in there. But thank you all for listening again and for your support this year. And any questions over the period, I'm sure things will come up. OTFC Group on Instagram, otherwise podcast@otfcgroup.au. And have a happy new year, and we'll see you in 2025.
See you then.